My name is Evelyn Carter, and I'll never forget the moment my life unraveled at precisely 10:06 a.m. It wasn't just any ordinary Tuesday, it was a day that would change everything, though I didn't know it yet when I walked into the office that morning. You might think this story starts with me being fired, but no, it begins long before that, in the quiet corners of ambition and betrayal. I've always been someone who believed in hard work. Not because I thought it guaranteed success, but because it felt like the one thing I could control in an unpredictable world. Growing up, I was the kid who stayed up late finishing homework while everyone else was asleep. In college, I juggled 3 part-time jobs to pay for tuition. And when I landed my first job at Innovatech, a tech giant known for its cutting-edge patents, I poured every ounce of myself into it. I gave them my ideas, my energy, my loyalty. But none of that mattered on October 12th. Let me back up a little so you can understand how we got here. My career at Innovatech started 5 years ago, fresh out of grad school with a degree in engineering and big dreams. The company had a reputation for fostering innovation, and I wanted to be part of something groundbreaking. They promised me opportunities, mentorship, and a chance to leave my mark on the industry. For a while, they delivered. I worked on projects that pushed boundaries, collaborated with brilliant minds, and even led a team tasked with developing what would become our crown jewel, a patent worth $940 million. That patent changed everything, for the company at least. It revolutionized data encryption, making information safer than ever before. Banks, governments, corporations, they all wanted a piece of it. And yes, my maiden name is on that patent, Evelyn Carter, right there alongside the names of the senior engineers and executives who oversaw the project. At the time, I was proud of what we'd accomplished, proud of the recognition, proud of the impact. What I didn't realize was that pride can make people uncomfortable, especially people who don't believe you deserve it. Enter Daniel Harper. If you're picturing some suave, charismatic figurehead, let me correct you right now. Daniel isn't charming or particularly smart. He's just well-connected. His wife happens to be the CEO's daughter, which means he waltzed into Innovatech without needing to prove anything. No qualifications, no track record, nothing. Just entitlement wrapped in a designer suit. From the moment he joined as VP of Operations, he made it clear he didn't care about collaboration or innovation. All he cared about was power and keeping anyone from stealing his spotlight. At first, I tried not to let him bother me. Sure, he interrupted my presentations, dismissed my suggestions, and took credit for ideas I'd pitched weeks earlier. But I told myself it didn't matter. As long as I kept doing good work, eventually someone would notice. Someone important. Someone fair. That's what I told myself, anyway. Things escalated last spring during the rollout of the $940 million patent. The press coverage was relentless, and suddenly everyone wanted to know more about the team behind it. Reporters asked questions about our process, our challenges, our inspirations. And then came the question I should have seen coming. Evelyn, how does it feel to have your name attached to such a monumental achievement? It felt amazing, honestly, for about 2 seconds, because almost immediately after the interview aired, things shifted. Daniel started showing up uninvited to meetings I led. He hovered over my desk, asking invasive questions about my workload. He nitpicked every decision I made, no matter how minor. Colleagues whispered warnings in passing. Be careful around him, they said. He doesn't like competition. Competition? Was that what this was about? I hadn't signed up for a rivalry. I just wanted to do my job. But Daniel saw me as a threat, and once he decided that there was no going back. Which brings us to today, or rather, to 10:06 a.m. I still remember walking into his office, summoned by an email that simply read, "We need to talk." No context, no explanation. Just those 4 ominous words. When I arrived, he gestured for me to sit across from him, his expression unreadable. For a second, I thought maybe he was finally going to acknowledge the tension between us. Maybe we could clear the air, move forward. How naive I was. Evelyn, he began, leaning back in his chair like he owned the damn building, which, technically, he kind of did. As you know, the company has undergone some restructuring recently. Unfortunately, your position is no longer necessary. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, no longer necessary? I'm leading a critical initiative right now. That initiative will be reassigned, he cut me off, his tone cold and dismissive. Effective immediately, You're terminated. Terminated. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, trying to process what he just said. This couldn't be real. Could it? You can't fire me, I stammered. Not without cause. Oh, there's plenty of cause, he replied smoothly, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside were screenshots of emails I'd sent months ago. Emails where I'd expressed frustration with Daniel's leadership. Harmless, venting to a trusted colleague, or so I'd thought. Now, they were being used against me. This is retaliation, I accused, my voice shaking. You're punishing me because you can't handle the fact that I contributed to something bigger than you. Daniel smirked, unfazed. Call it whatever you want. The bottom line is you're done here. Security will escort you out. And just like that, my 5 years at Innovatech came crashing down. 2 security guards appear within minutes, standing awkwardly by the door as if they weren't sure whether to feel sorry for me or follow orders. I grabbed my bag and stood up, refusing to let Daniel see me cry, refusing to give him the satisfaction. As I walked through the halls, past coworkers who avoided eye contact, I couldn't help but replay everything in my head. The countless hours I'd spent working late, the sacrifices I'd made for this company, the patent that bore my name but now seemed tainted by association. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was Daniel's ego and the fact that he'd won. But here's the thing about losing. Sometimes it makes you see things more clearly. Sitting in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, I realized something. Daniel Harper may have taken my job, but he couldn't take away what I'd achieved. That patent wasn't just a number or a dollar amount. It represented years of blood, sweat, and determination. And even though I'd lost the battle, I wasn't ready to lose the war. So where do I go from here? Honestly, I don't know yet. But one thing's for certain. I won't let Daniel define my future. Whatever comes next, I'll face it head-on with courage, resilience, and maybe just a little bit of revenge. After all, the best stories are the ones where the underdog fights back. And trust me, this underdog isn't done fighting. The days that followed my firing were a blur of anger, disbelief, and quiet resolve. I spent the first 48 hours holed up in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Daniel Harper. Each memory felt like a splinter lodged under my skin. Small but sharp, impossible to ignore. The emails he'd weaponized against me? They weren't malicious or unprofessional. They were honest frustrations shared with someone I trusted. But Daniel twisted them into something ugly, something dismissible. He wanted to paint me as difficult, disruptive, someone who didn't belong. What stung most wasn't just losing my job. It was losing the sense of purpose I'd built over 5 years. Innovatech had been more than a workplace for me. It was where I proved myself, where I made an impact. And now, thanks to one man's insecurity, all of that felt stripped away. But even in those dark moments, a stubborn voice inside me refused to stay silent. You're better than this, it whispered. Don't let him win. By the 3rd day, I decided to channel my energy into something productive. I started by reaching out to old colleagues, people I knew wouldn't judge me based on whatever spin Daniel had put on my departure. One of them, Rachel, agreed to meet me for coffee. She'd worked closely with me during the patent project and understood how much I'd contributed. Over steaming lattes, I vented everything. The unfairness of it all, the frustration, the sheer absurdity of being fired because Daniel couldn't handle sharing the spotlight. You know what's funny? Rachel said after listening intently. For all his scheming, Daniel doesn't realize how replaceable he is. You, not so much. Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity. Replaceable. That's exactly what Daniel thought he'd done. Replace me, erase my contributions, swept me aside like yesterday's news. But Rachel was right. My work spoke for itself. The $940 million patent wasn't just some abstract concept dreamed up in a boardroom. It was born from countless late nights, failed experiments, and breakthroughs fueled by passion and grit. If anything, Daniel's actions only highlighted how insecure he really was, and how valuable I truly was. That realization gave me clarity. I needed to reclaim my narrative, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might find themselves crushed under the weight of corporate politics. So, I did what any self-respecting engineer would do. I started researching. First stop? the patent itself. While my name was listed as one of the inventors, I knew there was more to explore. Patents aren't just legal documents, they're blueprints of innovation, proof of intellectual ownership. And if Daniel thought firing me meant erasing my legacy, he was sorely mistaken. I dug through files I'd saved over the years, notes, prototypes, correspondence, all evidence of my role in creating the technology. Then I reached out to a lawyer friend, Mia, who specialized in intellectual property law. Explaining my situation over the phone, I could hear her interest peak almost immediately. "This sounds juicy," she said with a laugh. "Let's talk about your options." Meeting Mia face to face was cathartic. For the first time since my firing, I felt like I had an ally, a strategist who could help me fight back. As we sifted through documents together, she pointed out something crucial. While Innovatech owned the patent outright, my contributions were undeniable. If push came to shove, I had leverage. Whether I wanted to pursue legal action or simply use this information to negotiate a better exit package, having proof of my involvement gave me power. But as satisfying as revenge fantasies were, I knew litigation wasn't my endgame. What I really wanted was independence, freedom to chart my own course, without answering to people like Daniel Harper. Which led me to another idea, one that had been simmering in the back of my mind since before my firing. Years ago, during a brainstorming session at Innovatech, I'd pitched a side project focused on making advanced encryption accessible to smaller businesses and individuals. At the time, the higher-ups dismissed it as too niche, too risky. Stick to enterprise solutions, they told me. But deep down, I believed in the concept. Technology shouldn't just serve corporations. It should empower everyday people. Maybe now was my chance to bring that vision to life. With Mia's encouragement, I began drafting a business plan. It wasn't easy. Entrepreneurship requires resources, connections, and capital, things I didn't exactly have in abundance. But necessity breeds creativity, and desperation fuels determination. I reached out to former mentors, industry contacts, and even a few investors I'd met during networking events. Slowly but surely, I pieced together a support system. People believed in me, not just because of the patent, but because of the work ethic and resilience they'd seen firsthand. One conversation stood out in particular. It was with Dr. Marcus Liu, a retired professor who'd once taught my graduate-level cryptography course. When I explained my plans, his eyes lit up with excitement. "Evelyn," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "this is exactly the kind of innovation we need right now. Big companies focus on profit margins, not accessibility. Your approach could change the game." His endorsement meant the world to me, not just professionally but personally. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. There were others who shared my vision, who saw value in democratizing technology. With their backing, I started laying the groundwork for my company. I called it CipherLink, a nod to both the technical foundation of encryption and the human connections it could foster. Of course, starting a business isn't without challenges. Securing funding was tough, especially when potential investors asked uncomfortable questions about my abrupt departure from Innovatech. Some assumed I'd burned bridges or made enemies along the way. To counteract these perceptions, I leaned heavily on testimonials from former colleagues and clients, emphasizing my track record of delivering results. Transparency became my guiding principle. Instead of hiding the circumstances surrounding my firing, I framed them as motivation, a catalyst for pursuing something greater. Meanwhile, Daniel's antics continued to make waves within the company. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances that morale at Innovatech was plummeting. Employees resented his heavy-handed tactics and blatant favoritism. Several key team members had already left, citing toxic leadership as their reason for departing. While I didn't take pleasure in others' misfortune, part of me couldn't help but feel vindicated. Karma, it seemed, was working its magic. Still, I refused to let bitterness consume me. Every hour I spent building CipherLink was an hour I reclaimed from Daniel's shadow. Late nights coding prototypes, early mornings pitching ideas, weekends fine-tuning marketing strategies. It all added up to something tangible, something mine. And as the weeks turned into months, I began to see progress. Initial funding came through, partnerships materialized, and beta testing yielded promising results. Through it all, I kept reminding myself why I started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about proving Daniel wrong or reclaiming my dignity. though those were nice bonuses. It was about creating something meaningful, something that aligned with my values, something that mattered. And yet, despite my newfound momentum, I couldn't shake the feeling that this chapter wasn't quite finished. Somewhere deep down, I knew Daniel wasn't done either. His ego wouldn't allow him to let things lie, not when my success threatened to overshadow his own. Whatever happened next, I braced myself for the possibility of confrontation, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people like Daniel don't go quietly into the night. So here I am, standing on the precipice of something extraordinary. Cypherlink is poised to launch, and I'm ready to step into the unknown with hope and determination. But as I look ahead, I can't help but wonder, will Daniel try to sabotage me again? Or will he finally realize that no amount of power or privilege can silence someone determined to rise? Months later, Cypherlink launched to resounding success. My encryption platform gained traction not just among small businesses, but also with privacy advocates and tech enthusiasts. Media coverage poured in, highlighting my journey, from being wrongfully fired to building a groundbreaking company. The same patent that once tied me to Innovatech became a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. As for Daniel, his toxic leadership caught up with him. A wave of high-profile departures at Innovatech led to an internal investigation, exposing his manipulative tactics. He was quietly pushed out, his reputation in tatters. Meanwhile, I found closure, not through revenge, but by proving that integrity and hard work always prevail. One evening, as I stood on stage accepting an award for innovation, I spotted Rachel and Dr. Lou in the audience, beaming with pride. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from bitterness, free from fear, and ready to embrace whatever came next. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about rising above. And rise I did, stronger than ever.